Okay. Good to see all of you. This is our illumination class. What is today? I can't even remember. Are we in January or February? All right, I think we're still in January, right? So we're going to begin, January 21st. We're going to begin with some prayers, which Mary Ellen is going to put up. Refuge and bodhicitta. There you go. So when you say prayers at the beginning, the whole point is to overcome your, the discursive thoughts in your mind and set your mind in a virtuous state of mind. So try to think of them authentically. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings, or it literally just says to benefit migrators. Drola Pencher, Sangye Drupasha. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly, Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrators. So I myself, the teacher, if the Dalai Lama were teaching or Lama Zopa were teaching, they wouldn't say, through the merits I create, through listening to the Dharma, they would say through the merits I create, or the collections I create through explaining the Dharma. Then mandala offering, sort of the condensation of all of the methods of accumulation of merit and purification. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And then, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form within the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down, release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs or the wishes of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Thank you. So good to see you. Cornelius has joined. Good to see you again. So we're going to begin with a little meditation to try to set our motivation in a not just on the verbal level, but at a more mental level. So sit comfortably, relax your body, relax your mind. Take a sip of water before I begin. Watching, recognizing your breathing, place your attention on the respiration. Once you've recognized it, hold it in mindfulness to the exclusion of everything else. Let go of any inner conversations. Try to let go of distraction to other sounds or sensations. In addition to recognizing when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out, try to watch the endpoints when it changes from an inhalation to an exhalation, for instance, or vice versa. Remembering the reason for this is letting go of the continuum of ordinary thoughts by focusing on something like the respiration leaves you in a kind of like a blank slate, your mind temporarily devoid of that continuum of worries or excitement or thoughts and so forth. Now bring your attention, having calmed your mind a little, bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Which you will recognize indirectly because it's a subtle object by recognizing the content. Thoughts, maybe the conception of yourself. I'm meditating. Or your body, if you have some sensation in your body. Plans for the future, memories of the past. Just general discursive thoughts about the present. All of these events take place within the conventional clear light nature of your mind. The fact that it is lacking any obstruction to the arisal of thoughts or to the reintegration of those thoughts into the consciousness, say the absorption of those thoughts into consciousness. Like a vast clear sky without color, not that sense, something that's not an object of eye consciousness, no shape or color, just known with the eye of wisdom, third eye, you might say. Eye of wisdom, the eye of gnosis, transcending the objects of other sight, so just the object of wisdom. This is our conventional Buddha nature, our developmental Buddha nature, that the presence of which indicates that we can develop all the good qualities up to and including Buddhahood. We can dismiss, we can eliminate, abandon all of the faults because they're not part of our mind. They are not the nature of our mind. Our mind is clear light by nature. And recognizing that can give great joy and courage that we can do. We can change our ways. We can do great things for ourselves and others. First of all, thinking of ourselves, we can get rid of all of our embarrassing faults, all of the things that we recognize as faulty that hurt ourselves, and that we can understand through the Dharma as being faults, even though we didn't accept them as faults up to now, because they have karmic consequences on us, stealing and lying and engaging in poor conduct. And we can extend that to think that we can use this developmental Buddha lineage to develop positive qualities so that we no longer harm other beings, and that eventually we can actually help them, not just with directions, how to get rid of a cold or how to build a basket or something, but directions, instructions of how to overcome their faults, how to develop positive qualities. We can use this life for that. The fact that we can recognize this Buddha nature, conventional Buddha nature, developmental Buddha nature, is a result of our having this auspicious moment, what the Buddha referred to it, and in other words, a life of leisure and endowment, leisure or freedom generally from the lower states or long life God states, freedom from states of being born as a human when there's no Dharma or under authoritarian policies that prevent us from the freedom of practicing religion. And we have the positive qualities. We have endowments or richnesses. We're born when the Buddha has descended some 2,500 years ago, when he turned the wheel of Dharma, taught the Dharma. Those teachings still exist. We have clear senses, intelligence, faith in the teachings to some degree, at least hope. There's the existence of fellow practitioners, the Sangha, and benefactors that provide the circumstances to have teachings. Benefactors can include the teachers and other participants or the members of a center, those who actually work or donate to provide the circumstances to hear the teachings. This life of leisure and endowment can be used in many ways, but the Mahayana understanding of its great value is that we can achieve enlightenment, or at least leave imprints in our mind to develop the great realizations of renunciation, compassion, great compassion, and the right view of emptiness. as a stepping stone to developing bodhicitta, the wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. I think this coming couple of hours, we're going to be listening, discussing, thinking about, and sometimes meditating when we have a realization becomes clear, holding that single-pointedly in our mind. We're going to be doing that in order to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom in order to achieve enlightenment, not just for ourselves, but for the sake of all living beings who have been depthlessly kind as our mothers, numberless lives, who are exactly equal to us in wanting to be happy and to be free of suffering. Transcending our usual egocentric view to include maybe identification with the entirety of sentient beings as myself, not just imputing me onto my present aggregates, which are the results of the egg and sperm of my mother and father, and as with the cooperative condition of numberless gallons of milk and pizza and tofu or whatever else. It's not something that's really me. I can impute myself and my interest into the bodies of sentient beings and their feelings and so forth. I'm going to listen to the teachings, contemplate them, and meditate when appropriate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's the reason I'm going to participate this morning. And then relax. Bring your attention back to the present. How are we doing? Some thumbs up. Okay, good. That's good. So, before we begin, any questions, lingering doubts from before? Couple of our, Stephen, good.
Well, thank you, Venerable George. I was wondering, so we say that, I think that the Supreme Assembly includes Pratyeka Buddhas and Shravakas. Is the reason they're included because of the reasoning that we're going through right now, that they've fully attained true full-blown and enlightenment, realization of emptiness, not enlightenment, realization of emptiness? Or are there other reasons for that?
They haven't achieved, did you say full enlightenment? They haven't
I said it mistakenly, and I tried to correct myself.
Okay, yeah, I got it. So first of all, when we say Supreme Assembly here, it doesn't generally include the Shravakas or the Pratyeka Buddhas. The Supreme Assembly refers to the Mahayana Aryas. And, so that would include those that have reached the path of seeing and above, all the way including the Buddhahood, So generally, when we take refuge in general, let's say at the beginning of the Guru Puja, we take refuge also in the Hinayana Arhats and so forth, and those practitioners. Let me just get back here. so I can see all of you. Where are we here? Oops. I want to be able to see. Okay, anyway, I'll get that in a second. When we say Sangye Churang Soki Chognam La, Chok means supreme, so that doesn't include in that instance, that doesn't include the Hinayana. We're taking refuge just in the Bodhisattva Aryas, because this is called Mahayana refuge, okay? Anyone else have a question?
So Venerable George, when we say Arya Sangha, are we implicitly including the Pratyeka Buddhas and Shravakas, or is that
If
sort
you
of
just say Arya, if you
Yeah.
say Arya Sangha, that would generally include not only the Arhats, the Hinayana Arhats, but the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha Aryas, those who have reached the path of seeing of the Hinayana path. So the reason when we say here we're taking refuge in the Mahayana Sangha, Supreme Assembly, here Sangha doesn't refer to ordinary monks and nuns. Sangha here is in the philosophical sense of those who have, even one individual who has realized emptiness directly is said to be Sangha. The monks and nuns that may or may not be actual Aryas, but just from the fact that they are ordained are just illustrations of, you might say, conventional Sangha. So when we talk about the Mahayana refuge, we're taking refuge in the Arya Bodhisattvas because they can lead us in the Bodhisattva path. That's the main point. Although in general, we do take refuge in the hearers and solitary realizers who have, say, realized emptiness and therefore are qualified to teach us about emptiness, but they're not qualified to teach us about the Mahayana path. Bodhicitta, the Bodhisattva deeds and so forth, because they're not found in their, they're not privy to that. Okay, I mean, some of the Hinayana Arhats and Aryas attended the Buddha's Mahayana teachings, and so they know indirectly about those, but they still haven't developed bodhicitta, and they don't practice the bodhisattva deeds. Does that help, Stephen? Someone asked this morning, I think it was Donnie, asked, is it Stephen or Stefan? I said, I thought it was Stephen. Okay, you're Stephen. Okay. So, hello, I think there's one I don't recognize, Gonzalo El Lineando. Hi, Gonzalo, where are you?
Hello, how are you, George? Nice to meet you.
Where are you?
I am from Argentina, actually.
You're from Argentina. Are you in Argentina?
Yes,
Hola.
yes, I am in Argentina.
Hola. Good, okay. And I think I recognize others. I think Melvin Horton has been here before, but I can't remember. But anyway. Okay, thank you. So any other question?
I have one.
Donnie's question
wait.
about Stephen's
I'm sorry.
pronunciation.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I take so many classes that well, Stephen and I were going over some references you gave before. Could you post those, like the books? Could you post those online on the Google Drive or something?
Are you talking to me or Stephen? What are you talking? What are you saying?
Well, basically you. Maybe I have the wrong class. I'm sorry.
What references are you talking about?
I think I have the wrong class. I take so many classes. I don't think this is the class.
I think you're thinking of
Yeah,
Dr. class, Danny.
I am. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
What do you think
Forget
of
it.
Tara?
Okay, okay.
Forget it,
okay,
Venerable.
There's
Okay,
a
no
lot
problem.
of
Forget
So
it.
someone else was about to ask a question. Oh yeah, Ida.
Well, I've heard this refuge, and I was wondering what kind of refuge is this? You take refuge in the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dharma, but also in the three vehicles, in the Prateka Buddhas and solitary realizers, and the Dakas and the Kinis, the heroes and herrings.
That's included. That's included in the three vehicles. Means is included in the Dharma. Okay, so that's not separate. When you talk about tantric refuge,
Okay.
the Sangha is extended to include the Dakas and Dakinis and the Pratika Buddhas. So it's still Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Okay.
So the Dharma includes the three vehicles. Like for instance, in the refuge prayer to Vajrasattva practice, I go for refuge to the, I go for refuge forever. I go for refuge forever to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I go for refuge forever to the three vehicles, the what is it? The heroes and heroines and
Dakas and the Kinis,
Dakas and Dakinis and so forth, especially my guru.
the Guru.
So all of that, all of that's included. If you summarize, is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah. Anyone else? Everyone okay? Where is, I can't see everyone here. Okay, Toby, are you okay? You have any questions? You're okay. Suvansh.
Yes, Venerable George, thank you. So the question that I have is that in the verses on the first bhumi, there's a verse that Chandrakirti says that the bodhisattvas, right, once they enter the path of seeing, they cross the path of seeing, because of their bodhicitta, they surpass the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. And then there's another part of it, of that verse, where he says that it's only at the seventh bhumi that they, or it's the eighth bhumi, at which stage they surpass the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas based on their insight.
Yeah, so the first, it's on, they surpass the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas in terms of their lineage upon achieving the path of seeing. So because they've entered into the Buddha lineage at that point. On the seventh bhumi, before the three pure bhumis, so you might think it has to do with the three, 8th, 9th, and 10th, but it's the seventh bhumi. They outshine the hearers and solitary realizers in terms of insight, in terms of wisdom, and we got anticipation of that will come when we get to that seventh bhumi in more detail. But it's mentioned from the Dashabhumika Sutra, the Sutra of the 10 bhumis, the 10 grounds, that at that point they can enter into and exit from the absorption into cessation in one instant. That means they can have a direct, they can enter, just from ordinary state when they're, looking around and so forth. They can enter into direct realization of emptiness, absorption into that in one instant, and exit from that in one instant. And Lama Tsong Khapa mentions, although there's various interpretations in other scholars, Lama Tsong Khapa mentions that was what his guru Rendawa said was the meaning of that, and that's what's indicated in the Dashabhumika Sutra and so forth. That's the meaning of excelling the hearers and pratika Buddhas in terms of wisdom. Does that clarify?
Yes. Well, okay, but I want to follow up. So where I'm going with this is that in terms of the realization of emptiness,
Right.
Would you consider that because once they reach that stage of 8, 9, and 10, there are degrees? It seems to me the text is saying that there are degrees of wisdom or emptiness that the Shravakas and Pateka Buddhas do not realize.
No.
Okay, that's
They realize the same emptiness.
Okay.
It's the accompanying factors on the method side, you might say, other qualities of mind that make the bodhisattva's realizations of emptiness more useful, and also the fact that they have used numberless reasonings to establish emptiness, like in the Fundamental Wisdom by Nagarjuna. There are how many chapters, Paul?
24?
27, I believe.
27 chapters talking about emptiness of, the Four Noble Truths, the emptiness of the mind, the emptiness of nirvana, the emptiness of coming and going, and sort of process and everything. So, giving an example, there are probably even other applications of emptiness, whereas in the Hinayana, the reasonings to establish emptiness are like form is like a mass of foam and so forth, these quotations from the Hinayana Sutras. So they have very limited reasonings. So the Bodhisattva's wisdom is said to be more quick and more comprehensive like that, but it doesn't realize a different emptiness.
I see.
Same emptiness.
Okay. What I just want to say, Venerable George, is that if you read Mipham Rinpoche,
right?
If you read his Beacon of Certainty,
right, famous,
and where he evaluates 7 questions, right?
Okay.
His question number 2 is exactly this issue, and his position is not the same as what I'm hearing is Chandrakirti's position.
Okay.
Or Lama Tsong Khapa's position. So it seems to me.
What's his position? His position.
So first of all, his definitions and the terms that they use over there are selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of the individual. And what he says.
We talk about that also. We talk about the selflessness of the person, right, and selflessness of phenomena. That's no different.
Okay. But what I think he is saying is that selflessness of phenomena, their realization is not equivalent, is not at par.
Is not what?
Is not at par to the bodhisattvas.
Well, this is what we're going through here. It's the position of Nagarjuna, the position of Arya Deva, the position of Buddha Palita, and the position of Shantideva, Chandrakirti, of course, Shantideva, that the Hinayana practitioners, the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, do realize the emptiness of phenomena. I'm not sure, would have to see Mipham's position about that. It may be that in the school that he was, talking about, they talk about the possibility of achieving nirvana by simply realizing the selflessness of persons. But it's clear from all of the things that we have talked about and will be talking about in the next couple of weeks, that simply realizing the selflessness of persons without having realized the subtle selflessness of phenomena, one cannot achieve even nirvana. One cannot even become an Arya being. So it's not something that's exclusive to Lama Tsong Khapa. One of my Drigung Kargyu friends, when I asked him, in your school, do you believe that the hearers and solitary realizers realize emptiness? And he said, of course, this is Nagarjuna's position. It's Chandrakirti's position, which all of these schools accept. And it's the position of Shantideva, the quotations that we've just been finishing the last couple of weeks. Position that it's not that the hearers and solitary realizers, in order to become Aryas, in order to become Arhats, they have to realize the emptiness of phenomena, not simply the selflessness of persons.
So is what you're saying emptiness of a phenomena or
All
of
phenomena.
all phenomena?
All phenomena,
Okay.
not just the phenomena of the person, because persons are phenomena, but generally when you talk about the distinction between persons and phenomena, phenomena means phenomena other than persons. So we talk about the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. You might say, well, persons are phenomena.
Right. No.
But when you make that distinction, persons and phenomena, phenomena refers to all other phenomena other than persons.
I see. No, I mean, my point was, they have 27 chapters in MMK. Maybe the Arhats realize, half of it, right? But not all of it. But I think what you're saying is, no, when we say that they realize the emptiness of phenomena, it's the emptiness of all phenomena. That means all of the 27 sections.
They don't have those reasonings, those 27
Oh, they don't have the reason. Okay, got it.
They don't
Methods.
elaborate, but for instance, Arya Deva says in his famous text, the 400 stanzas that we've talked about before,
Yes.
400 stanzas about the yogic behavior of bodhisattvas.
He says, if you realize one, you realize them all.
It means that if you've realized the emptiness of one phenomena, you have realized an emptiness which applies to all other phenomena. So how you interpret that, for instance, if the Hinayana Arhat, or say Hinayana Arya, has realized the emptiness of his or her own form, right? Like the quotation I mentioned before that will be coming up from the Hinayana Sutras, that forms are like a mass of bubbles. Feelings are like, I can't remember, different things, illusions and so forth. If you've realized the emptiness of the substratum upon which you're imputing the I, that is your 5 aggregates, you have realized the emptiness of the person, not just the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. And that can be applied without a lot of effort to all phenomena. So they do know that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, but they don't have the quickness of mind to be able to engage in the reasonings to prove that. For instance, why do the bodhisattvas need to do that? Because they have to remain in cyclic existence for possibly 3 countless great eons, struggling, with taxes and taxi drivers and all sorts of things, that they would have to apply, that could become obstacles to the path, to their enthusiasm and so forth. So they need to have reasonings that they can apply in every single kind of situation. Whereas the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas may achieve their nirvana in 1, 2, 3, maybe 16 lifetimes at the most. that they have to keep their enthusiasm up, you know. So there's a difference in that. Let's leave it. Let's
Got it.
leave it.
Thank
Let's
you.
leave it at. Let's leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay. So, are we ready? Can we go on? Okay. So we are beginning, and thanks to one of a student reminded me to say that we're on the top of page 88 in Hopkins' book, page 159. And if you have the digital text, look for it. In this way, comma, they naively attributed faults. You can search for that. You'll find our place. So,
Venerable George, I
yes.
know that for Paul's edition, he's on 88, the top of 88. In my edition, I'm on the bottom of 87, where it says this is a grave error.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my mistake. I'm sorry. My edition is actually the pre-publication proofs.
Oh,
My apologies for that. I was wrong last week.
very interesting. Okay, no, not a thing. Thank you for that, Ron. So, what we're talking about here is, let's just go to the sentence before that. There's a quotation a little further up on the page. It says, the same meaning is conveyed in the 60 stanzas of reasoning. In those whose mind possess a locus, why would the grave poison of the afflictions not arise? Or as Jeffrey translates that, how could the great poison of the afflictions not arise for one whose mind has a base or basis? That means, the basis of the aggregates. If they think that the feelings, for instance, do inherently exist, how could it be that the afflictions would not arise? The earlier statement about there being craving because of the presence of feeling was criticized by Khapa and Sek Wangchuk Senge. These are some other Tibetan lamas. They asserted that this is not a sound reasoning, for it involves inferring an effect on the basis of the presence of a cause. In this way, they refute Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way. They're refuting, they're criticizing Shantideva. They engaged in such refutation for the following reasons. Between the two schools of thought are on whether or not Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas realize the selflessness of phenomena. Whether or not means the two schools. Some say that they do realize the selflessness of phenomena. Some people think they don't. Between those, the latter standpoint was more prevalent in Tibet. I think that the latter is that they don't realize the selflessness of phenomena. That was kind of like the general, because there were a lot of Tibetans who followed Kamalashila and Shantarakshita, these Spatantrika Madhyamikas, who said that there were, it was possible to achieve liberation by simply realizing the selflessness of persons based on the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. The latter standpoint was more prevalent. It was more common to believe that that the hearers and solitary realizers didn't have to realize emptiness. And as such, people were more familiar with that tradition, and they have not engaged in a comprehensive study of the scriptural sources that Shantideva was referring to and that Chandrakirti was referring to. And the reasoning of the first school of thought. They have therefore failed to appreciate the finer points of the most profound style of philosophical reasoning of Chandrakirti. So this is where we will begin. In this way, they have naively attributed faults to those who are highly learned. This is a great error. Or as Hopkins says, they err greatly in rushing to impute fault to the great wise Shantideva. Okay, so that's where we are. So continuing, similarly, some Tibetans apparently raised criticisms against Chandrakirti. And in Hopkins' book, he mentions Bhutan Rinpoche, who was wrote the famous history of Buddhism in Tibet, and who was the sort of the compiler of what our present collection of the teachings we call the Kangyur and Tangyur, right? Have you heard of those terms? Julie Caldwell, do you know what the Kangyur and Tangyur are?
I know what they are in terms of their complete renditions of the teachings of the two different schools, but I don't know them personally. I have rolled them in a prayer wheel.
They're not two different schools.
They're not
Kangyur,
two different schools at all. They're the Tibetan school, and they're the compilation of all the Buddhist teachings in the Tibetan form.
Thank you, Donnie. Yeah, I was just about to
Welcome.
say that. Thank you. The teachings that that are attributed to the Buddha himself are called the Kangyur. Ka is an honorific term in Tibetan that means vachana. It's sort of honorific for the speech of the Buddha, the Buddha vachana. So that includes all the sutras and the Vinaya that the Buddha taught and the Abhidharma that's attributed to him. The Tangyur is a translation of the commentaries of way past early great scholars who were closer in time to the Buddha in India, generally. I think in the Tangyur, almost all of them are of Indian origin. Those are what are called the Shastras, the commentaries. Okay, so the Kangyur and Tangyur. So Bhutan was the famous Lama in Tibet before Lama Tsongkhapa, who compiled decided which texts would be in the Kangyur and which would be in the Tangyur and so forth. Hopkins says Bhutan, Pension, Jomrel, and so forth. So there were other lamas who held this position. Here too, these are gratuitous objections leveled without a careful understanding of the opponent's position. They only betray the person's true nature, one that would be a source of deep embarrassment were it to be seen by the learned ones. Jeffrey translates this a little bit differently. They express spurious faults without having any detailed understanding of their opponent's position, that is, Chandrakirti's position, that hearers cognize the selflessness of phenomena. Thus, when the wise see them illustrating their own nature, their own character, it is only a source of extreme embarrassment. So anyway, this is kind of like how the Tibetan lamas referred to others who they felt were making mistakes in their scriptural interpretations, sometimes a little bit caustic. Okay, understood thus, the explanation of the commentary's assertion. So what does it mean, the explanation of the commentary? That's the text by Jayananda, the only Sanskrit commentary that we had to the Madhyamaka Vatara. Remember, Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes praises Jayananda's understanding of some things, sometimes he criticizes them. So understood thus, Jayananda's assertion that the path of the 16 characteristics, 16 aspects, such as impermanence, can eliminate the acquired afflictions, that means the intellectually formed afflictions, but not the innate afflictions, remains incorrect as well. So he's pointing out that if you were to in reading Chandrakirti, if you were to look at Jayananda's commentary about this section, he says that the Hinayana understanding of the selflessness of person based on the 16 characteristics can eliminate the acquired afflictions, but not the innate ones. That's wrong. It can't eliminate either. For insofar as temporary cessation of mere manifest afflictions, acknowledged commonly by all three vehicles, that means when we talk about the three vehicles, you sometimes hear about the three vehicles, right? Some people say it means, what do they call it? Hinayana, Mahayana, and Tantra. In Malaysia and in the East, they sometimes say, have you heard that, Paul? When they talk about three vehicles in the East. But in the Mahayana scriptures, the three vehicles means the Shravaka Yana, Pratyeka Buddha Yana, Yana means vehicle, and the Bodhisattva Yana. Okay, so for insofar as temporary cessation of mere manifest afflictions, what does that mean? That means, remember, when you meditate on the 16 aspects and so forth, you can temporarily cease the manifest afflictions. They don't manifest for some time while you have that realization, but the seeds of them are right there. For insofar as temporary cessation of mere manifest afflictions acknowledged commonly by all three vehicles is concerned, this is the same for both the acquired as well as the innate afflictions.
Hey, Venerable George, I have a question.
Yeah, I see that, but I'm continuing for a minute. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, all right.
Yeah. Just hold your horses. Is that expression is that acceptable to say? Hold your horses. It's not how to say politically incorrect.
These days, you never know. For me, it's fine. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay. And as for not eliminating their seeds is concerned, this is also the same for both acquired and innate afflictions. The author of the explanation, that is Jayananda, seems to have failed to understand here how to demonstrate that the intentions of Chandrakirti and Shantideva remain the same. So what he's saying is that, when we talked about the mundane vipassana, remember, first concentration, second concentration, and so forth, they can cause to temporarily cease the manifest afflictions of various realms. With mundane vipassana, you can cause them to be temporarily ceased all the way to the peak of samsara, peak of cyclic existence, but not including the peak of cyclic existence. With the meditation on the selflessness of persons, this depending on the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths and permanence and so forth that the Hinayana extols in their scriptures, you can cause all of them to be temporarily subdued, even the afflictions of the peak of cyclic existence. But it will not cause them, it will not cause them to be abandoned so that they will never come back again. It will not cause the seeds to be impotent, to cause them to be abandoned. Okay, Donnie, what do you want to add here?
You realized you said seduced.
Did I say seduced? Okay.
You did. I forgive you. I love you. Thanks, sir.
Okay. That's all you wanted to say. Okay, good. So where are we? So, for insofar as temporary cessation of mere manifest afflictions acknowledged commonly by all three vehicles is concerned, this is the same for both the acquired as well as the innate afflictions. And so far And as for not eliminating their seeds is concerned, this is also the same. Okay, so next paragraph. Now, if one has not realized the aggregate's lack of true existence, if you still grasp at phenomena other than the person as being truly existent, which is the general position of the Hinayana, the Sarvastivada and everything means that all phenomena are truly existent. If one has not realized the aggregate's lack of true existence, one will not realize the person's lack of true existence. You might think you could realize that the person lacks true existence, but still think that phenomena outside are truly existent. That cannot be. In which case, one would then not have realized the selflessness of persons. Just as the emptiness of true existence of the aggregates and so on is defined as the selflessness of phenomena, right? The emptiness of true existence of persons must be defined as the selflessness of persons. The reason is identical in both contexts. So we can go back and this seminal line I like to remind you of in the Heart Sutra when Shariputra is asking Avalokiteshvara, how did the Bodhisattvas practice the perfection of wisdom? And Avalokiteshvara says, the Bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates also, implying, that although the Hinayana sometimes might, they might slip up and say the emptiness of the person when they really mean the selflessness of the person according to their own schools. Avalokiteshvara is reminding Shariputra, or mentioning to Shariputra, that the Bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the five aggregates also, the five aggregates upon which you impute the person. That is, they meditate on the emptiness of phenomena, not just on the emptiness of a person. Are we all together? Rachel, what are you thinking? You have one of those looks on your face like you're not sure.
I think I get it, but I don't hold it all in my mind at the same time. Somehow, the whole meaning of what's going on here is hard to hold all of the pieces in my mind at the same time.
Yeah. So in that respect, I wanted to mention something I was going to read last time. Snehi, I'll get to you in a second, okay? This is from Jose Cabezon's Dose of Emptiness. In Tibetan, it's called Tong Tung Chemo. Tong is short for Tongbani, emptiness. Tun means you can say it's like a dose of medicine or a session. Tun can also mean session. It can mean a kind of a session, about emptiness. It's the, talking about really difficult points of the Prasangika. So this is, for those of you who want to go more deeply, you should have this amongst your library. In that, Jose Cabezon on note on page 706, note number 706 on pages 482 and 483, he says, this section on why the Pratika Buddhas, on why Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas necessarily realize emptiness, is one of the longest and most detailed of the entire Tongtung Chemo, this Dose of Emptiness book. So this is in answer to Rachel's thing, how can you keep them all in mind at the same time? It's like one of the longest and most detailed, despite the complexity of the section, especially of the exegetical material that sets forth the correct interpretation, the quotations from sutras and so forth, of certain scriptural passages such as the one found in the Dashabhumika Sutra. Remember the 10 Bhumi Sutra? The point being made is very simple one. Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas attain arhatship. Of this, there is no doubt. To accomplish this, they must forever rid themselves of the afflictions, right? The kleshas. The only method to accomplish this in turn is through the direct perception of reality, the direct realization of reality. That is, through the direct understanding of emptiness. Hence, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, despite their impoverished attainments in the area of method, upaya, they don't have bodhicitta, they don't have the bodhisattva's deeds, they do cognize not only the selflessness of the person, but also the selflessness of phenomena. That is full-blown emptiness. In short, the difference between Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas on the one hand, and the bodhisattvas on the other, lies not in the realization of emptiness. Both groups accomplish this. Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas both realize that. It lies instead, the difference between Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas on one hand and the bodhisattvas on the other, lies instead in the degree of their compassion and altruism, right? Bodhisattvas have great compassion and bodhicitta, and in the extensiveness of their understanding of emptiness. Remember, I mentioned the bodhisattvas have all of these different reasonings, extensive reasonings to prove emptiness, because they need it. Remaining for 3 countless great eons, they need to be able to analyze any kind of adverse condition that comes up to keep their minds in the Dharma. It lies instead in the degree of their compassion and altruism and in the extensiveness of their understanding of emptiness. Bodhisattvas having an understanding of reality that is more in-depth by virtue of the fact that they have mastered many forms of reasoning that establish emptiness, a feat the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas cannot claim for themselves. Okay, so that's for those of you who are like Rachel and me, kind of hard to keep all these balls in the air at the same time, right? It's like the juggler was taking one too many Coke bottles to toss up, and they're beginning to hit the floor. Snehi, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. So, in following along, Chandrakirti's argument that if you don't realize the emptiness of the aggregates, the basis of designation of a person, you cannot get rid of all the afflictions. But I always wonder, looking at it from the Pratika and Shravaka point of view, that if you realize the selflessness of person, then what would be grasping at afflictions? Like, you don't have that, that concrete self that's now grasping at anything. Why wouldn't that work? Because
that person that they have realized is lacking a self-supporting substantial existence, that's not, that indeed is true. What they have realized is indeed true. And it can cause certain delusions to be subdued, not seduced, to be subdued. But there is a subtler sense of the person beyond the person apprehended to be self-supporting, substantially existent. There is a subtler sense of the person as being inherently existent. There are delusions that arise because of that apprehension. In fact, because they have not realized, if one has not realized emptiness and only realized the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, there are some delusions that as we have mentioned before, and will be mentioning again, that the Mahayana accepts as afflictions, as klesha, that the Hinayana says they are not, they are non-afflicted delusion, non-afflicted ignorance. Do you remember this? In the Abhidharma, at one point, what's the difference between the Arhats and the Buddha? The Buddha is an Arhat, but the Buddha is also Buddha. What's the difference? The Buddha has eliminated not only afflicted ignorance, but also non-afflicted ignorance. That is what we're talking about here. Non-afflicted ignorance doesn't mean the obstructions to omniscience. Non-afflicted ignorance means an ignorance that still exists once you've gotten rid of the ignorance according to the Hinayana Abhidharma, which supposedly is eliminated by realizing the person is empty of self-supporting, substantially existent person. So according to their scriptures, once you've realized that, as you say, you've realized there's no self-supporting, substantially existent person, but you may still, if that's all you've realized, you definitely still are grasping to an inherently existent person. That grasping is what is being referred to here as unafflicted, non-afflicted klesha, in the Abhidharma scriptures. Go on.
I think the trouble I'm having is that for the Pratyeka Buddhas, they don't feel they're grasping at anything. Like they really feel that if they do the work and realize that self-sufficient, substantially existing self, the lack of that, they're done. Like they are in nirvana. Right?
According to
their school,
the tenets, according to the tenet texts, not, but as we see that, as we will see, I mentioned before, there are quotations in the sutras, the Hinayana suttas, that imply that phenomena are empty of inherent existence also. What Nagarjuna was saying in the Precious Garland, and we're saying here in the text, is that simply realizing the person is empty of self-supporting substantial existence does cause things to get better. From the point of view of the practitioners, say the meditators in this little community, where someone has deep realization of that. They might appear to be an arhat to that community. Their klesha are subdued, are suppressed. They seem to be, not get angry, even when criticized or hurt or something. But those delusions haven't eliminated the seed. That practice hasn't eliminated the seeds of the delusions. When the right circumstance arises later, they can get angry. They can get attached because the seeds have not been eliminated, because they haven't realized the emptiness. They haven't realized the emptiness of inherent existence, or the emptiness of true existence, meaning from the Prasangika point of view means the same thing. They've realized a lesser realization, which hasn't been able to abandon completely the delusion so that they will never come back again. All they've been able to do is suppress them. Okay?
to think about it more. I'm still thinking it through. Thank you, Venerable George.
Okay, so although as Jose says, this is complicated, and as the analogy I gave to Rachel about tossing, the juggler having so many balls in the air at one time, is hard to keep them all together. At the end, if you think about it, it's not that hard to understand.
If I may, Venerable George, you had mentioned that point about non-afflicted ignorance.
Yeah.
That what exactly, so it's not the like the kleshas of the anger and attachment and so forth. It's a type of ignorance.
Okay, so that's a terminology. The non-afflicted ignorance is terminology that's found in the Hinayana, texts on the Abhidharma, like in Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha. What it's referring to is that to differentiate between the arhats, the Hinayana arhats, and the Buddha. So the Hinayana arhats would say, the Abhidharma says the Hinayana arhats have eliminated ignorance. And then what's the difference then between the Buddha? The Buddha, does the Buddha, hasn't the Buddha eliminated more ignorance? Yeah, he's eliminated not only the, quote, afflicted ignorance. For them, afflicted ignorance means the ignorance that arises from grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person. There is a kind of a set of delusions that are energized by grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person. So if you've realized that, those delusions are not abandoned, according to the Mahayana, they're only suppressed. But according to the Abhidharma, the Hinayana Abhidharma, they are abandoned. Okay. Why are they not actually abandoned, as the Hinayana Abhidharma thinks or says? Because there's a subtler source of all of these delusions, which is the grasping at inherent existence. If that is there is no way to abandon the delusions so that they will never, ever, ever come back. Abandon them. All you can do is suppress them. That suppression in a community, like I said before, say in a small community of practitioners, that individual has a deep realization of this selflessness of persons according to the Hinayana, lack of self-supporting, substantially existent person, that person can seem like an arhat, wise and, and not disturbed and so forth. But they will, until they've realized emptiness, even if they were to die in that state and everyone is revering them, oh, the great arhat has passed into parinirvana, they will take rebirth in cyclic existence again. Because at the time of death, the seeds to impel a future rebirth will be activated by craving, grasping. And that seed will then become the link called becoming of the 12 links, right? So they will definitely take a rebirth until they have realized emptiness. Okay, so yeah. So in one hand, your mind might want to say, I still have doubts. On the other hand, think about it a little bit more. In one sense, it's very simple. What they are calling, wow, lots of hands up. So what on one hand, they are calling afflicted ignorance is only the ignorance that is grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person. That's not the entirety of ignorance. There's a deeper ignorance that that grasps to the inherent existence of phenomena. That ignorance is the actual root of cyclic existence. So when we talk about the root of cyclic existence, different terminology, but they both mean the same thing. Nagarjuna says, what is it? If I get the order right, Paul. Nagarjuna says that ignorance of inherent existence is a root of cyclic existence. Chandrakirti says the view of the transitory collection is the root of cyclic existence. But the transitory collection grasping at the transitory collection is grasping at that the person is inherently existent. So they both get down to the same thing.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I'm not sure whose hand up was next, but Sean is next in line. What do you think, Sean? Be careful when you're driving, Sean.
Yeah. I guess I feel like I've asked this question before, and I feel like you gave me the answer that that's what this whole text is about. What have we defined as inherent existence? Like how is that being defined?
Inherent existence. Well, inherent existence doesn't exist, right?
Correct.
There is an appearance to the mind, to all of our senses and to our mental consciousness, that phenomena that we apprehend conventionally exist from their own side, are somehow findable. You know, right in front of me is my microphone. You don't see it because it's above the camera here. There's my microphone. If I think of microphone, it has parts, but if someone had said, oh, I broke your microphone, there is a thought in my mind, there's a real microphone somewhere existing from its own side, not just the name microphone, not just the conventionally existent microphone, which is named or designated or attributed to its parts. That sense of findability, that if you analyze something, you can find the real essence of it there. That is what's called inherent existence in a nutshell.
So like if, for example, if I said, so there's the appearance of the body, and yes, it looks like it exists on its own, separate from everything else. But if I like cut off oxygen from that body's not going to last very long. So is that not an example of it? I mean, like, I just don't understand how people hold some of these views.
Well, it's not a matter of holding views. It's a basic kind of ignorance that we have not eliminated since beginningless time because of our familiarity with it. If you say, for instance, if someone says, you're fat, Sean, you are a chubby little boy. Sean is not, he's very thin. I'm just using that so, so he doesn't get offended that he might be chubby. He's actually quite thin and lithe. So it's Sean, you're fat, or Sean, you're stupid. There is an apprehension in our mind that we, in this case, Sean, exists independent of the body and mind. There is an inherently existent Sean that exists. When we say, Sean, you're a thief, Sean doesn't think my body is a thief or my mind is a thief. There is a thought, Sean, the inherently existent Sean, has been deprecated in some way. That's an example of an apprehension or grasping to an inherently existent phenomena. Actually, Sean does exist conventionally as just a name, just a concept attributed to his, designated to, imputed upon his 5 aggregates. But not being satisfied with that, thinking there's got to be real Sean somewhere, holding to that what appears to the mind as being an inherently existent Sean, holding that to be true, that's called true grasping. It's grasping to a self of persons. Now, I'm just going to take 2 more questions and then continue. Otherwise, we'll never make any progress here. Shanka.
Yes, thank you. 2 questions. One is very easy. Which page of the Kabizon are you did you refer to? 106, is that what it was?
It's note 706.
Ah, okay.
Which is on pages 482 and 483 of his text. So it's a note, because how do you say, this text was written by J, right? Dose of Emptiness.
Yeah.
J doesn't say this section in my text is complicated. Jose is making that observation in his note. He says this section on why the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas necessarily realize emptiness is one of the longest and most detailed in the entire Hongtang Chemo, Dose of Emptiness. So I had mentioned that to try to calm Rachel's angst that having all of these things together is hard to keep them all. Yeah, it's very complex. So this is, those of you who are following along, you can feel a little bit of Dharma pride. You know, like, I'm,
No
you know,
way, there's no way, there's no way.
maybe not Donnie, everyone else can feel a little Dharma pride that you're courageous, you're understanding this. Sumvansh.
Oh, wait, I had a second question. That was the easy one.
Okay, quickly.
Sorry. Okay, I'm missing something very foundational. And so now I have no Dharma pride whatsoever, because you mentioned from the Kabizon text,
yes,
that the difference between the bodhisattvas and the second Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, other than the degree of compassion, was that the extent of understanding on emptiness, because they don't have the reasonings that the bodhisattvas do in the Mahayana, right? But I think you mentioned that they both understand the same emptiness of person and phenomena.
yes,
Is that correct? Okay.
that's right.
So here's what I can't reconcile.
Okay.
That statement that they both understand the same emptiness of person and phenomena, and the second statement, which is that their nirvana is self-subsistent, emptiness of self-sufficient, substantial existent person.
No, that's what their treatises in the Pali Canon seem to say, especially in their, let's say, their commentaries to the sutras. But there are some suttas, Hinayana sutras, that do hint at and imply the emptiness of phenomena also, like form is like a mass of foam and so forth. Okay, we'll be getting to that. So
okay.
They have not reached nirvana simply on the basis of realizing the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person.
So, okay. So then what we're talking about is, you know, even though they might attain all the accomplishments of the peak of cyclic existence, and they have only subdued, not eliminated their afflictions, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the Mahayana are saying, right? About the Hinayana, that even though they might, they're only subduing, not eliminating the affliction.
No. It's quite clear.
What I mean.
That,
I like.
Hold on.
Rachel, I'm confused.
It's quite clear that the Mahayana accepts that there are Hinayana arhats. There are Shravaka arhats, there are Pratika Buddha arhats. But they're not arhats in the sense of that are enumerated in the Hinayana texts. According to the Hinayana tenets, let's say enshrined in Abhidharma Kosha and other kinds of texts. It's possible to achieve arhatship by realizing the emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Mahayana says that's not possible to achieve arhatship by that. Those people who have achieved that understanding, that selflessness of person, of a lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, they look great. They've subdued their afflictions temporarily, but they have not abandoned any of them. They have not abandoned the seeds of the afflictions. So those Hinayana arhats who are actually arhats have come across these seminal teachings from the suttas that indicate that phenomena also are empty, not just the person is selfless, that they have meditated on that and achieved arhatship. Now, in the time of the Buddha, there were many disciples who were said to be actual arhats. Maybe the Buddha actually said they had achieved arhatship and so forth. So they must have been privy to that emphasis, not only on the selflessness of the person, but on the selflessness of phenomena. And when they realized that, they realized also a deeper kind of selflessness of the person, not simply that the person was empty of a self-supporting, substantially existent self, but the person was empty of an inherently existent self, that subtler kind of appearance to the mind.
So
that's what's being.
Okay, you can cut me off because I'm not being quick here, and you wanted to keep going, so I can ask later. But I just wanted to follow up, which is that. So then am I correct in this statement that the Mahayana say that?
You can't say the Mahayana probably. Probably you have to say Prasangika say.
Okay, the Prasangika.
Because the Mahayana includes Chittamatra, which does.
True. Right. You're right. You're right. Yeah. So the Prasangikas say that even the original sutras, the Hinayana tenets, require that you achieve selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. I'm sorry. Selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. However, the way that the Hinayana interpret that, they only see that interpreted as achieving selflessness of phenomena or the gross selflessness. Is that correct? That statement that
I'm not sure what you're saying.
So I'm saying what the Prasangikas say is that you are required that regardless of that the Buddha's original statements and the sutras, etc., say that you have to realize selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena, like the foam and so forth and so on, right? The form and foam, right? That statement. So that is interpreted by the Hinayana saying you have to realize both selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of person.
No. Stop there. So according to the tenet that came about interpreting the suttas, the tenets, right? By Bhashya.
These are the shastras we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So according to them, you can become an arhat simply by realizing the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. But there are indications in the suttas that those shastras, as you like to, as you put, is well put, the various kinds of texts, commentaries, and so forth. Even Buddha Ghosha and others. They are not taking into account other statements in the suttas and perhaps oral commentary that was passed on, what we call mengak, actual oral instructions that the actual arhats passed on, that phenomena also have to be considered, not just the selflessness of the person, which is just very, very gross, but that the basis upon which you impute the person, the aggregates, that means all impermanent phenomena, are also empty of inherent existence.
But
So
is-
if you and as I mentioned, if you look in Buddha was it?
Yeah, I have that
Bhikkhu
text. I'll
Bodhi's-
look it
okay,
up.
good. I'm glad you have it. If you look in there in the section that talks about this particular sutta,
Okay,
this
it's okay.
sutta,
I won't get it now, but go ahead. Yeah.
you will see him saying the same thing. Oh, you shouldn't think that this is talking about what the Mahayanas talk about emptiness, because everyone knows phenomena truly exist other than the person, you know. So that he's still, that's still sort of like the mainline position, even of Bhikkhu Bodhi, who studied all these things and studied, I think he's translated even some Mahayana texts also.
Yeah.
So in fact, I think it wasn't he the one who translated the Abhidharma Samuccaya.
Yeah.
One of the translations. So this is, as Jose points out, this complicated, and those of you who are trying to juggle all these things can feel some Dharma pride. Now, last question, Sumvaj.
I'll
Yeah.
relook at this video and
Stop.
then I'll try to understand. Yeah.
Stop. Sumvaj.
Venerable George, I want to just ask you about helping to clarify definitions and terminology.
Okay.
And there are three categories of terms that I will use, and I would like to understand essentially, in your view, what is the difference between these three terms that are here? Okay. Number one is swabhava. Okay. I come from a Hindu family, and I and my grandparents' parents, they always talked in terms of swabhava.
Right.
Okay, that's number one. Then number two is, in reading English translated philosophy texts, they use the word impermanent, unitary, and independent self.
Right.
That's number two.
Right.
And number three is they use self-sufficient, substantially existent person.
Okay.
So those are the three categories. Could you
Okay.
please differentiate between those?
Okay. So svabhava, sva means kind of self, right? Svabhava is, in Tibetan, we say rangshin, which means, can mean nature. It can mean fundamental nature. So svabhava is used in Prasangika, let's say generally in Mahayana, but to be precise in Prasangika, it has two different uses. One is that we perceive a svabhava, a self-nature, rangshin, in all phenomena, as though they have something within them that exists from its own side that is its nature, its svabhava. The Sarvastivadins believe all phenomena have, svabhava, even the person, even the person who lacks a self-supporting existent, substantially existent person would still have a svabhava, its own nature. Prasangika says that it's the lack, like for instance, if you do some tantric sadhanas, we say, Om Svabhava Shuddho, Sarva Dharma, Svabhava Shuddho, Om Sarva Dharma, what's it? Om Svabhava Shuddha, Sarva Dharma, Svabhava Shuddho Ahang. What that means, Shuddha means, how do you say, pure, pura, Om Svabhava Shuddha Sarva Dharma. Sarva Dharma means all phenomena. All phenomena are pure or free of a svabhava that we apprehend, that appears to us, but they're actually empty of that. Om Svabhava Shuddha Sarva Dharma. Svabhava Shuddho Hang. That means I myself, the self is also empty of that svabhava, of any kind of svabhava. So that's one, on the one hand, one meaning of svabhava, nature. Means another way we can call it is self-nature or inherent existence. Yet emptiness is itself is said to be svabhava. When we get to the 6th chapter, so there's a little bit of confusion. We can say there is a nature, not a svabhava in the sense of inherent existence, but the lack of inherent existence itself is the ultimate svabhava, the ultimate nature. That's the nature of all phenomena, emptiness. Okay. Generally in the Hindu tradition, I'm not that familiar with, but certainly in the Hinayana, they talk about svabhava actually existing. When we talk about the grossest sense of self that arises from the Vedic teachings, that the person is permanent, partless. Let's say the Atma is permanent, partless, independent. It can do what it wants. It's not dependent on anything else. It isn't comprised of parts, and it is eternal, which can be taken to mean permanent also. That sense of, in the Hinayana scriptures, when they talk about the gross selflessness of persons, from the Hinayana point of view, they're talking about the sense of a person being permanent, partless, and independent. That is an intellectually acquired view, let's say, dependent on adhering to the Hindu, or let's say the Vedic scriptures, that there is such a, but there is not an innate conception from life to life that the person is permanent, partless, and independent. That is something that is acquired by learning or mislearning, or believing the Vedic scriptures that the person is permanent, partless, and independent. So from the Hinayana point of view, that is something that's worth getting rid of, because at the time of the Buddha, many of the people came from the Vedic tradition. They might have believed in that, and they were holding intellectually that such a person existed. According to the Hinayana, the subtle selflessness of persons is the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. So those are those 3 levels. So let me continue if I can.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not sure exactly where I was. I think now, if one does not realize the aggregate's lack of true existence, one will not realize the person's lack of true existence. If you haven't realized that the aggregates are empty of inherent existence, empty of true existence, they lack true existence. If you haven't realized that, you will still be grasping at a self of persons, in which case one would then not have realized the selflessness of persons. Just as the emptiness of true existence of the aggregates and so on is defined as the selflessness of phenomena, right? When we say that the emptiness, emptiness of true existence of the aggregates and so on. So do the aggregates include all phenomena? I'm not going to ask Donnie because she knows. Okay, she's nodding her. So Doris, do the aggregates include all phenomena? The category of the aggregates?
I'm going to say no.
Oh, because you watched Donnie. Okay.
No, I didn't. I just don't want to elaborate.
Why don't the aggregates include all phenomena?
That's why I don't want to elaborate.
Okay, the aggregates include all impermanent phenomena. Form, feelings are impermanent, right? Discriminations, consciousness impermanent, compositional factors are impermanent, and consciousness is impermanent. So the 5 aggregates include all impermanent phenomena. But there are other phenomena that are permanent, that are also empty. That's why it says, and so on. Just as the emptiness of true existence of the aggregates, all impermanent phenomena, and all permanent phenomena, in other words, and so on, is defined as the selflessness of phenomena, the emptiness of true existence of persons must be defined as the selflessness of persons. So what is this? What is the selflessness of persons? It's not just the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. It's a lack of a truly existent or inherently existent person. What does that mean? It means that focusing upon the conventionally existent person, let's say the conventionally existent Don, there is a conventionally existent Don, imputed upon his 5 aggregates, focusing upon that, and due to familiarity from beginningless time, that sense of Donness seems to be inherently existent. That is what is being eliminated here. The reason is identical in both contexts. We talk about the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. In both cases, it's the lack of an inherently existent person or an inherently existent phenomena. Understood thus, grasping at a true existence of persons must be defined as grasping at the self-existence of persons. Until this is extinguished, till this is abandoned, afflictions cannot be completely extinguished. Jeffrey translates that as, because a conception that the person truly exists must be posited as a conception of the self of persons, it is impossible to extinguish all afflictions until that has been extinguished. Okay, how are we doing? I'm not sure. Is it Tal Abadi? You following? Tal? Can you?
Yes, that's
yeah.
my name.
Yeah, Tal.
I'm
So,
trying. I'm trying.
Okay, following somewhat. Hi, Shanka. I'm going to ignore.
Very quick.
Okay.
So, Swabhava is what Hopkins in his, the emptiness book, calls natural existence, correct?
No, it's self-existence. Yeah.
Because he mentions like 20 odd or whatever it is.
Yeah. We call them hypothetical synonyms. Why are they called hypothetical synonyms? Synonyms because none of them exist. Does svabhava in the first sense that we talked about here, inherent existence, does that exist? No, it's believed to exist. It appears to exist. The mind assents to that appearance. That's what's called grasping. There are other things existing from its own side. There's a whole list of hypothetical synonyms. None of those exist. That's why they're called hypothetical synonyms. For two things to be synonyms, they have to exist.
Right, I understand that, but I guess what I'm asking is, anyway, it's okay.
Okay, yes, okay, stop. Okay. Understood thus, grasping at a true existence of persons must be defined as grasping at the self-existence of persons. Until this is extinguished, afflictions cannot be completely extinguished. And moreover, the grasping at the true existence of persons and phenomena must be characterized as forms of affliction. So according to the Hinayana, right? According to the Shastras or the Abhidharma and so forth, there is an afflicted ignorance and a non-afflicted ignorance. You know, the Buddha is eliminated. Also something, he's gone beyond the state of an arhat because he's eliminated this subtler form of ignorance, which is not an affliction, according to them. But according to the Prasangika, even that which they're calling the non-afflicted ignorance is actually an affliction, that is, grasping to inherent existence. The Buddha has not only eliminated the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, but he's also eliminated the grasping at inherent existence. This exact standpoint must be attributed to the tradition of Shantideva as well. Okay, so we talked about Chandrakirti's position based on the quotations from the Dashabhumika Sutra, the Ten Bhumi Sutra. We talked about Nagarjuna's statements in various places. Again, quotations from Nagarjuna will be coming up. That the person, that to realize, to actually achieve nirvana, to become an arhat, you have to realize the emptiness of phenomena also, not just the emptiness of the person or the selflessness of the person. And Shantideva gave various reasonings also. In that context, I wanted to mention also those of you who are studying Shantideva with, is it Dr. Ross? I don't know if he has a title in the basic program. When you get
Dr. Ross.
Ross Moore.
Ross Moore, okay. So the text that apparently you're using, if you go to the 9th chapter and you look in that chapter around verse, I think 43 or something like that, the verses, maybe starting a couple of verses before that, it's talking about the Shantideva's argument. First of all, why the Mahayana Sutras are the word of Buddha. Because first of all, the Shantideva said, it says in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, it says in these other sutras that until you realize emptiness of phenomena, you cannot achieve arhatship and so forth. And then the Hinayana says, but you don't need to realize emptiness. You can just realize the selflessness of the person on the basis of the 16 aspects and so forth. What you Mahayanas have up your noggin, that this Mahayana exists, it's just a figment of your imagination. So Shantideva begins explaining this very famous section that I've referred to you before when we were studying tenets and other courses, what we call Techen Kadup. Paul, how would you translate Techen Kadup?
Well, Tekchen obviously is Mahayana. Kadup, what's the spelling on that? I'm sorry.
So Bao Ka Ka.
Yeah. So establishing the Mahayana as the word of the Buddha.
Right. Establishing the Mahayana as the Buddha Vachana, the actual speech of the Buddha. So the Hinayana would like to say, oh, these Mahayana sutras, they talk about all this stuff that's just made up. It's like a sky flower. Did anyone have a sky flower? You know what a sky flower is? You know, it's as though there's a flower in space, the stem of which just comes out and doesn't have any roots in the earth. Doesn't exist, or like the son of a barren woman. A barren woman is someone who's incapable of giving birth. So if you have the thought that barren woman's son has stolen your wallet, that's erroneous, right? There's no son of a barren woman, right? So the Mahayana Sutras are like a sky flower, or the son of a barren woman. They don't have any, they're just imaginations. So Shantideva explains in that section around verse 43, the couple of verses before that, first of all, various reasonings why one can understand the Mahayana is the speech of the Buddha. Very, very famous. Nagarjuna also wrote very much about this. Bhavaviveka, who was the founder of the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, wrote, great deal about this, the establishment of the Mahayana as the Buddha Vachana, as the speech of the Buddha. Chandrakirti also, Shantideva in that text, also in the Mahayana Sutra Mahayana, was it Mahayana?
Yeah, George. Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, the ornament for the Great Vehicle Sutras.
Right.
The Mahayana
It's not that it's one of the other ones of Maitreya. There's a whole section, whole chapter on establishing the Mahayana as the word of the Buddha. So this is very, very important. I remember when I went to Malaysia one time, and there was a conference, a Buddhist conference, and some of the abbot of the great monastery there, Hinayana tradition, Theravada tradition, criticized the Mahayana, in his opening speech. We all know the Mahayana, it is not the speech of the Buddha, and I was kind of amazed that this was the position. When I came back to India, I visited Samdong Rinpoche, who was the director of the Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies at Sarnath. I don't know if some of you have run across Samdong Rinpoche. Anyone have heard of Samdong Rinpoche? Couple. Samdong Rinpoche, great being. I think afterwards, many years later, he was named the first prime minister of the Tibetan government in exile because of his extraordinary qualities. So I went to see Rinpoche, and I mentioned this, and he sort of sat there, kind of smiling. He said, "Oh, that's an old story." Since the time of the after the Buddha passed away, when the Mahayana was discussed in the Hinayana scriptures, it was often, demeaned in this way, that it was not the word of the Buddha. So Shantideva's section in that 9th chapter, that's the wisdom chapter, that the quotations that we read were from, preceding them 1 or 2 verses before that is Shantideva establishing the Mahayana as the word of the Buddha, and then giving those quotations. So let me just go a little bit further here. Now, the sources in the Mahayana Sutras. We're going to come after this to the sources in the Hinayana Sutras. Right now, first the sources in the Mahayana Sutra. So the discourse for Stiradashya is cited in clear words. The clear words, the Prasana Pada, which some of you pointed out was not clearly worded, you didn't think, but that's the famous text by Chandrakirti, his word commentary to fundamental wisdom. Madhyamaka Vatara is his meaning commentary. So in there he quotes this sutra, which Jimpa took as, well, he took from some Tibetan translation, Stira Adhisthaya, but it's actually the Adhisthaya Samojdhana you can see in Hopkins' text in 233. It's a little bit complicated. Those of you, most of you are not going to be interested in these details, but in the translation by Anne MacDonald of that of the first chapter of the Prasanapada, she attributes it as a different translation of the name. And anyway, there is a sutra, something to do with Adhisthaya. Adhyasya. So it says, for example, when the musical spell of a magician is heard, and this has to be understood, this is, I think, a mistranslation on Jimpa's part. It's not talking about a musical. Usually rolpa can mean music or musical instrument, but here it just means a performance. When a magical performance is seen, experienced, some seeing a woman conjured by the magician experience lustful thoughts, right? Maybe, I'm sure no one here looks at pornographic sites on the internet, right? Shanka,
Oh, never, kind sir. Not us.
I'm
We're
joking.
innocent.
I'm joking. That's sort of like the traditional kind of thing. No one is supposedly the most populated internet sites are the pornography. But anyway, so some seeing a woman conjured by the magician experience lustful thoughts. So the magician has created this beautiful apparition of a woman. His mind is driven by desire. I think it's mainly talking about men seeing this, right? He becomes self-conscious among his companions and feeling embarrassed, he leaves his seat and walks away. Maybe he's gotten, energized. Having thus gone away, if he now engages in contemplating that woman as unattractive, transient, means impermanent, dissatisfying, and empty and devoid of selfhood, right? In order to get over his lust, he thinks, listen, that she was, I'm going to say, unattractive. Actually, when we talk about, it might appear superficially as attractive, but understanding that attraction is based on misapprehensions and so forth, inappropriate attention. Transient, she's impermanent, not being able to satisfy and so forth, and empty and devoid of selfhood. O child of the lineage, Hulaputra, so this, it's kind of an epithet for the bodhisattvas. What would you think of this? Is this person who meditates in that way proceeding in the right manner, or is he proceeding in a distorted way? What do you think? So in answer, I'm not sure who's answering here, it might be Manjushri. Blessed One, when there is no such woman, there's no real woman out there, it's just an apparition, right? Just a magical creation. When there is no such woman, the striving of that person who engages in contemplating her as unattractive, transient, dissatisfying, and empty and devoid of selfhood is a distortion, right? It's not right, it's wrong. The Blessed One, the Buddha, then responded, here too, O child of the lineage, you should view those monks and nuns as well as some male and female lay disciples who engage in contemplation of phenomena that are in actuality unborn. That means they're not inherently created, and unoriginated, who contemplates that phenomena that are actually empty of inherent existence as unattractive and as transient and as dissatisfying and as empty and devoid of selfhood, should be likewise, should understand that to be wrong also, wrong way of contemplating. I do not say that these foolish people are practicing on the path, for they should be described as proceeding with distortion. What do you think? Oh, Julie's got her concentrating there.
What do I think? Are we
No,
having,
no, no.
are we having a revision? Are we having a discussion session on Monday, and who's leading it?
I hope so.
Okay.
So the point is, if you see a magical creation, and because of your response to that being so visceral, maybe the man gets excited sexually or whatever, in order to calm those lustful thoughts, you meditate that this woman is impermanent and so forth. That's getting at it the wrong way. That person doesn't exist at all. So what's he getting at? He's getting at the fact that if you were to apprehend the aggregates as inherently existing, and so your delusions are enraged by that, and you just contemplate that they're actually impermanent, they are unattractive. What are the other things he says? That transient, dissatisfying, and empty of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, that person is practicing wrongly. So here's a source from the Mahayana Sutras that's saying quite clearly, as Jimpa says, here a parallel is drawn between someone grasping at an illusory woman as an actual woman, right? Getting all excited about that, and contemplating her impermanence and so on the one hand, and someone grasping at the aggregates to be real and contemplating their being impermanent and so on the other hand, right? Are you following? Okay. Let me see. Richard, what do you think?
I think that's, sorry, I think that's kind of a mind-boggling statement, and I'm trying my best to understand it, because it just seems very, very, very deep, and I'm not exactly sure I think I understand the words, but I'm not sure I fully understand the meaning. Sorry.
Okay. So my suggestion to all of you is to read ahead, right? I've mentioned this several times before, so that you've read this material before class, and that you might have some qualms about it. So it's not the very first time you're encountering this is when I'm saying it now. Okay, Mary Ellen, what do you think?
Is it like you're seeing the horns of a rabbit, and then in response to seeing the horns of a rabbit, you're thinking, oh, that's a beautiful rabbit with horns on it. And then you're saying, no, I need to apply the antidote to that. So it's not a beautiful, it's not a, whereas the horns of the rabbit just aren't there to begin with. So you don't need to apply any antidotes to it.
Yeah, as the Italians say, eccola. Yeah, that's it. So instead of just contemplating that it doesn't exist at all, which is the right way to go about it, thinking that illusory woman is actually, which you're believing to be a real woman, is actually impermanent, using the usual antidotes that are found in the Hinayana scriptures to reduce attachment and so forth. So without realizing that the object that your delusions are activated by, the object is actually non-existent. That is actually empty of an inherent existence. The thing that you're believing in doesn't exist at all, like the horns of a rabbit. You're contemplating how it's impermanent and so forth. That's wrong. Continuing, to draw an analogy between the two, between the example of the aggregates as being inherently existent and so forth, and the illusory woman as being a real woman. To draw an analogy between the two requires instances where one takes real aggregates as one's object of focus. And that means one takes the aggregates as being real. They're not real. They're not real in the sense of being true, right? They're actually empty of that. But what you're thinking of them as true. You're thinking them as real, and you contemplate their impermanence and so on. Since this is a distorted state of mind, erroneous in relation to its apprehended object. What's this apprehended object? The aggregates that you're apprehending as being real. Its content is, of course, not established by valid cognition. Now, Jeffrey translates that a little to me more clearly. This is a case of observing truly existent aggregates. You're not actually, when it says you're observing what appear to be truly existing aggregates. They're not truly existent, right? And considering them to be impermanent and so forth. And such consideration is only a wrong consciousness, mistaken with respect to its referent object, which is truly existent impermanent aggregates, which in reality do not exist. Therefore, such is not validly established. So that's a wrong way of thinking, oblivious of the fact that the aggregates are actually empty of inherent existence, someone grasping them, believing them to be inherently existent, and then contemplating their impermanence and their impurity, the fact that they cannot bring satisfaction and so forth. Just on the basis of that, that's wrong practice. Generally, in the Hinayana tradition, that's considered to be right practice, right? However, within the mental continuum of a person who has not yet eradicated the apprehended object of grasping at true existence, so in our continuum, we haven't yet abandoned the grasping at true existence, right? Yet, there can still be numerous instances where he takes the aggregates as his object without qualifying them as either true or false, and on that basis establishes their impermanence and so on by means of valid cognition. So there is a correct practice, again, without qualifying these as either true or false. What is that referring to? Remember, those of you who attended an earlier course that I gave for Shantideva Center called Practice of Emptiness, which we use the text that Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Rapton had translated from the Sacred Words of Manjushri. You remember that course, right? Snehi, do you remember? You were there, right? Okay. So in there, we talked about various situations the text talked about. Say, for instance, you can have an apprehension of some phenomena, let's say my microphone here, and grasp at it as truly existent, believing that it's truly existent. You can have a person who's realized emptiness directly and apprehending that microphone, and even though it's appearing to be truly existent, the person thinks it doesn't truly exist. That is what we call the illusion-like meditation on emptiness, right? Phenomena is appearing, but that's like Santa Claus walking, there's like Santa Claus walking down the stairs. It's actually Shanka, it's not really Santa Claus, right? The third situation is a person who just, is over here concerned with something else and said, where's your microphone? He said, oh, it's over there. Not grasping it still, there is the, within your continuum, you haven't eliminated grasping at true existence, but you can just refer to the conventional phenomena without grasping at it as being inherently existent, truly existent. That was one of the categories. If you have that text still, you can go back and check. So that's what's being talked about here. Within the mental continuum, however, within the mental continuum of a person who has not yet eradicated the apprehended object of grasping at true existence, you haven't eliminated grasping to true existence. There can still be numerous instances where that person takes the aggregates as his object without qualifying them to be either true or false. That is, the first two examples is, that is truly existent microphone. The other one is that the person who's realized emptiness in illusion-like meditation thinks that's not true. That's false. That's not a real microphone, right? Between those two situations, there's a third category where you don't grasp to either of those. There could still be numerous instances where he takes the aggregates as his object without qualifying them, the aggregates, as either true or false, and on that basis establishes their impermanence. There's a right, so the right way to meditate on, say if you developed desire for a member of the opposite sex, like say, instead of the illusory woman, there's actual woman or actual man. I always joke Richard Gere or whoever the example is nowadays, Brad Pitt or someone else. Who's the current icon for eye candy for male? Not Donnie. No, I'm talking about male. Okay.
Thought it was George Clooney.
George Clooney, something like that. Right. Good. So you can, without grasping it at it being truly existent, still you can contemplate the person's impermanence, their dissatisfying nature, and so forth. You can go through that analysis, and that can be valid. That wouldn't be a wrong consciousness. The quotation was given here about the illusory woman thinking that it was real, right? That's analogous to looking at the aggregates and thinking that they're real, truly existent, but they're impermanent and so forth. The correct analysis would be that they are, not grasping at them as real, not necessarily having realized that they're empty of inherent existence, but just in that neutral state, and then contemplating their impermanence and so forth. When one meditates upon these facts as well, similarly, stages of the path, realizing impermanence and so forth, will arise in their mental continuum, unqualified in a manner described above. So there is a proper meditation on impermanence and so forth, as long as you're not grasping in, you're not holding them to be inherently existent. What do you think? Making sense? Rachel, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking about Lojong and how actually when those things arise is when you want to train the mind. And so I'm wondering how this, maybe because it's a completely different context, you don't have to worry about this apparent contradiction.
Say that again.
So my understanding of some practices is that when these things do arise as appearing real in your mind is when you really want to practice undoing that. And sometimes that's by going into the impermanence of it or the lack of true existence of it. So how I'm a little
that's quite
confused.
different. That's quite different. We're talking about the standard ones. You're not talking about true existence here in your antidotes. You're talking about, just in the Hinayana sense, meditating on the let's see, when we talk about the the four wrong views, that compounded phenomena that are all compounded phenomena are impermanent, right? All contaminated phenomena are suffering. All phenomena are empty and selfless. Nirvana is bliss. Those are called the four right contemplations, right? So the wrong contemplations would be phenomena are permanent. So in that context, meditating on them as being impermanent can act as an antidote to that. Contemplating phenomena that are contaminated, that is, the phenomena that we experience that are the result of our contaminated karma, contemplating them as being blissful is wrong contemplation, is a wrong thought, right? So contemplating that they are actually the nature of suffering is the right contemplation, so forth. Here, you're not grasping at any of those things as being inherently existent. So before I ask if there are any more questions, next time we're going to begin there. And that is what page are we in the book?
I was 111 on the digital, but it varies.
No.
Page,
Donnie, not digital.
page 80,
I know the hard copy.
bottom of page 89.
Okay. Bottom page 89. This is where we're going to begin next time. And this is, again, the Concealing the Concentration Sutra as cited in clear words states. That's where we're going to begin next time. Okay. So for those of you who are hearing this material for the first time, it, as Rachel had mentioned before, is like trying to keep so many balls in the air at the same time. It's kind of hard to keep everything together. It may seem complicated, but as you think about it, again, go back on the basis of what we've talked about, reread some sections, read a little bit of ahead. I think you will come without a lot of effort into the state of mind that says, man, this is not so hard. Right now, it seems really complicated, right? Let me ask, because Paul, what do you think? You've heard this material before.
Yeah, but I've been reading it over and over again for 30 years, so I've had a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I hope 30 years would be a little bit of an advantage. So it will take a little bit of effort, but this is one of the seminal ideas here. As I mentioned, my Kargyu friend, when I asked him, in your tradition, is it Drigu and Kargyu, do you accept that the hearers and solitary realizers, to become Aryas and to become Arhats, that they necessarily realize emptiness? And he said, of course. Yeah, so it's the position that's held by all of the main schools that accept the Prasangika. There might be some subsects of some traditions, they're talking about from the Svatantrika, Madhyamaka point of view, or even the Chittamatra point of view, that say they don't necessarily have to realize emptiness. But from the essential point is that if you still are grasping to phenomena as inherently existent, feelings can arise as a result of that, like seeing the apparition of the magician, right? It's like believing that it's real, then lust and all these other kinds of delusions can arise. Maybe even fear if the magician creates an elephant snouting, snorting smoke from its nostrils or something like that, and fear can arise, and so forth. So let me ask, in the end here, any other questions that you have nagging?
I have just a practical question, and I asked it earlier, but last week I came to the Monday time that was registered, and there were only 2 of us there. And I just wanted to know if there is a leader of that session, or is it just anyone who shows up? How does that work on the Monday discussion? I forget what time.
I can answer that. Anyone who shows up, there's no leaders per se.
So my suggestion would be that some of you who have the time attend some of those discussion groups. Even if it's just, even if you think, the blind leading the blind, you can ask each other questions. You can try to clarify things. This is how we usually proceeded when we were studying in the ill-fated Geshe program. Lama Yeshe tried to get the Geshe program to be recognized in our FPMT centers early on. The Gelugpa Society said that they would recognize that, and then later they reneged on that. But while we were studying those subjects under Geshe Tekchok at Madhusri Institute and other places, every day we met as a group. And even if it was just trying to, asking questions like, what's the definition of that? Or what comes after that thought, and so forth. Even if it was just an exercise in trying to remember, it was very, very useful. And at times there would be misconceptions that we ourselves among the students could, help other students overcome their misunderstandings. And then as a result of that, in those discussion groups, which is like the debate sessions of the monks and nuns, as a result of that, after some time of discussion, when you still can't clarify a position, that's the time to ask the question to the teacher, in your Tibetan class.
Okay, I have time to answer the question. Okay, we want to know when this discussion group is. I found it buried in an email, and I went there, and it's only me and one other person. It's not very well advertised.
When is the discussion, Shaka?
On the Facebook page, if you go there, you'll see.
Well, we don't all have Facebook.
So
I'm sorry, but that's the one we standardized on.
Okay, so Shanka, my suggestion would be on the Shantideva Center, maybe it would be Snehi, there is a section on that page of resources for the course. It mentions various texts. If you could also put on there the time of the discussion group, is that possible? So that people who don't go on who don't want to sign up for Facebook could see when the discussion is?
Yeah, I think we have it on the protected materials page. I think the password is PATH, P-A-T-H. If you just go to I'll put the link in the chat. And if you just go there, you'll see how to sign up or not how to sign up, but the Zoom link for the discussion group, because it's a different Zoom link.
Thank you. That's kind of convoluted, but thank you so much.
Okay.
It's also on the original email of your registration.
I know,
There's
that's
a
where I
link
got
there.
it from.
Okay, that's where I got it from too.
Okay, so so those are good procedural questions. Any last Dharma question? Anyone's going to go to bed tonight with a headache because there's something that's nagging? Shankar, you're not going to go to bed with a headache, no comment. Rachel, you're okay? Don, you have a question?
I do. And it's based on, I think the Lama teachings on the view of the transitory collection.
Yeah.
And through that, we first grasp at inherent existing of the phenomena, and then the I and mind, grasping at self-existent person. But then we realize, if I remember that right, we realize the emptiness first of the person, then of phenomena. This seems to imply that it's either the reverse of that or simultaneous.
No. So this will come up again. I think we've talked about it a little bit in the past before. When you talk about the evolution of the delusions, you know, how they come about. Let's say the grasping at let's say the view of the transitory collection, grasping at the person as being inherently existent. The apprehension of a person, myself, let's say, my own conception of myself, depends upon having apprehended my consciousness, knowing that I'm thinking, I'm asking, my body, if someone were to say, you're fat or you're dumb or you're this or that. So the evolution comes about from first apprehending phenomena and grasping at them as being truly existent, and then apprehending your own self and, you know, the I and mine. When we talk about realizing emptiness, well, let's say even in the presentation of emptiness in the sutras, usually there's a presentation of the emptiness of phenomena first of all, and then the presentation of the emptiness of the person. In terms of realization, it's said that one first realizes the emptiness of the person rather than the emptiness of phenomena. Why is that? Because the important point in realizing and tasting emptiness is to apprehend the object of negation, to recognize the object of negation. Do you remember what the object of negation is, Don? In the case of personal selflessness?
It's the view
of the inherent
the view of
self.
the I.
Donnie, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Don. Don, again?
The view of the I.
The view of the I. That's not right. What's the object of negation? What is, you know,
inherently existent I.
The appearance of an inherently existent I, right? The inherently existent I doesn't exist. So the object of negation is what appears to your mind as an inherently existent I. That's you have to recognize that. When you talk about other phenomena, my microphone, my tree, my car, and so forth, because they're not so viscerally connected with our own continuum, like I am, they're a little bit more difficult to apprehend the object of negation, to recognize the object of negation. So that's why it's said that the first realizations of, well, one of the reasons why the realization of the selflessness of person precedes the realization of the emptiness of phenomena. Okay, something to think about. So some people are dropping out, maybe have gone way over. Let's dispense with the other prayers and just do a short dedication here. You know, relax your body and mind. Let go of the frustration. Recognize that at the beginning we created, we tried to emulate simulate a bodhicitta motivation. So we've created some virtuous karma, even from the side of the subject matter, the teachings of Lama Tsong Khapa, Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna, and so forth. listening to those teachings, we've created some virtuous karma. So to help to protect this merit from being, dissipated in the future, in senseless worldly, because virtue will necessarily bring about some happy event in the future, instead of being that just used up, exhausted in some senseless pleasure in the future, dedicating the merit that it become the cause of my continued realizations from life to life, up to and including enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Due to this merit, may I quickly become a Buddha in order to effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead all sentient beings out of suffering into everlasting blissful happiness of enlightenment. Okay, so thank you. Who knows if someone maybe would be kind enough to email me the time of the next discussion, I might show up. So why don't you come to the next discussion group and fill out some of your stuff? Okay.
How
So
do we
come-
email you?
I will email it to you, Venerable George.
Yeah, someone knows my email address. Okay. Take care. See you next week.
Thank you, Venerable
you.
George.
Thank you,
Review.
Mary Ellen.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.